Okay, and we're live. Hi, everyone. It's great to see all of you. And we're here with Lee Blue for our webinar today. How are you today, Lee?
I'm doing awesome, Joanne. Thanks for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
Yeah, I'm super excited. You have this amazing energy, and I'm just like here trying to keep up. So this is awesome. Yeah, if everyone could just give us a shout up in the chat, just say hello. Tell us where you are, and if you're excited about the webinar today, if you have anything to say, we'd love to hear you. So yeah, I'm Joanne from GoWP, and I just want to give you a big welcome to everyone to today's GoWP webinar, Going High Ticket, Learning the Art of Value Pricing Web Design with Lee Blue. But before I go straight into it, really quick, I just want to give you a couple of words about GoWP in case anyone watching isn't familiar with us. At GoWP, we create happiness for digital agencies and help them to become more profitable. Whether you're looking to grow your agency with a developer or a copywriter, a dedicated designer, or a project manager, or you're interested in outsourcing services so you can focus on growth, we've got you covered. We actually just launched our new blogging service. So if you want to get your blog on autopilot for the rest of the year, for the rest of the quarter, whatever your needs are, we totally got you covered. We've also built an active community of over 1,800 agency owners where we hold regular group calls, webinars like this one, and mastermind sessions, also workshops as well. So you can grow your agency with GoWP. We are you're just committed to helping agencies grow through the resources we provided the community and just having a place where everyone can be supportive of each other and lift each other up. So I will drop the link to the community onto the chat. Oh, we got someone from Toronto, Canada. Oh my God, Mexico. Sorry, I'm keeping up with the chat as well. It's so exciting. So yeah, if you have any questions about partnering with us, or how we can help your agency, feel free to reach out, whether it's directly to me on the chat or via our website or our comments, however you choose. Just reach out and we'll be super helpful. And just a few notes regarding the webinar. I will be watching the chat. So if you have any questions, just throw them and I'll get them to Lee. And yeah, we're doing a quick test of the chat. Chat is working. We have people from we have people from Canada, people from freezing in Ohio. I am in Houston and it's finally a little cold. Lee is up in Virginia. What's your weather like in Virginia, Lee?
It's, I don't know, 40 some degrees, I guess. It's not too bad. Kind of sunny today.
Not too bad. It's 50 here in Houston, and I'm like, I'm freezing. So that's just so funny. So, okay, I've got the chat is working. So let's get to it. Let's get to why we're here today. So a quick intro on Lee. So Lee Blue is the founder of DoubleStack, an advanced 8-week mentoring program for serious web designers and WordPress consultants who want to build a business for themselves that generates up to $10,000 per month. So his mission is to show web designers how to build their own 6-figure business without buying ads or having to chase leads all of the time. That sounds pretty awesome. He has almost 20 years of experience running his own web design agency, including developing a WordPress plugin that has over $1 million in sales. Lee is now mentoring web designers, as I mentioned before, and he has a portfolio. So everyone he's mentoring, his goal is to get his clients to not lose their integrity or sanity in the process. In his free time, Lee loves kayaking the waterways with his wife, growing food. Me too, that's so cool. And spending time in the woods. He is also a musician who plays the acoustic guitar and loves music and poetry. Welcome, Lee.
Thanks, Joanne. That's awesome. I'm really excited about this. This is, in fact, every time I get a chance to give a presentation like this one, It's my favorite one because I've gotten feedback from people, but just from this one presentation, people have been able to double, triple, even 10x their rates because there's a huge mindset shift that happens when you start going high ticket as opposed to trying to like price hourly or by the project or something like that. So I'm super excited to jump in.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's great to hear that you are already like people reach out to you immediately like, hey, it's just reframing your mind. You're able to like also reframe your business. That sounds amazing. So yeah, let's get into it. I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself and take it away, Lee.
Awesome. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so I can get some slides going. Awesome. Okay, so here we go. So going high ticket, the art of value pricing web design. As we go through this, I'm going to try to go really quickly through all of the slides, and then you may have some questions at the end because we're going to go through an example of like how to price a value-based project and how to scope it, and what are the ingredients for all of this stuff. We'll even talk about even partnering with GoWP as part of the project. But you might have some questions, and if you have some questions, we're going to try to save some time at the end to make sure we can go through that. But for right now, I'm going to just kind of zing through everything as quickly as I can so that we can kind of get through all the content. So going high ticket, the art of value pricing, web design. I am Lee Blue, and here we go. So who is this going to be for? This is for, let's see here. 3 things. You need to have a results-driven mindset. So what that means is it's one of those things where if you just want to like build a website or design a logo or just kind of do the implementation, then what we're about to talk about isn't really going to work. It needs to be about how do you get results for clients? Like how do you get more calls on people's calendars, or how do you get more sales or more leads coming in or something like that. So the results are really important. The second thing is leadership, which again kind of leads back towards not being an implementer, like just doing the implementation, but actually showing the client where they need to go in order to get the results that they're really looking for. And then the third thing is serving as opposed to selling. And when you go high ticket in the way that we're talking about here, for me to be able to feel like I could be successful at doing this, I had to figure out some way to not be high pressure sales and just kind of overbearing, and instead have the mentality of serving rather than selling. Meaning, hey, I figured something out that I think is going to be a huge benefit to you. Let me tell you how it works. And if you agree that it's a good idea, then we can move forward together on it. If not, that's totally cool too. I'm not going to try to push anything on anybody. I'm really here to serve people, to help them get the results in their business and in their lives that they really need. And of course, people like us, like you and me, we know how to do that better than they do because we specialize in web design and digital marketing, and they do something else. So how can we serve clients at a deep level? Those are the 3 kind of requirements to be successful at what we're about to dive into. So now let's talk about, well, what's the client profile? How do you identify a client who is going to be a good candidate for a value priced and high ticket project? And there are a couple things that we're looking for. We're looking for basically 3 things. And the first one is a short sales cycle, right? So like the tools that we use as digital marketers and web designers are going to be best suited for people that, for clients that have a relatively short sales cycle, which means usually business to consumer or business to small business. What we're trying to avoid are like business to business that's really large scale. Like nobody ever bought like $1 million commercial real estate building or whatever because they joined your email list or something like that, right? It's like if there's a long sales cycle, a lot of people need to be involved, and it's just going to take forever to figure out. It's not really the best candidate for what we're talking about. So we're talking about like real estate agents, even things like lawn care, anything in health and wellness. Like as long as it's consumer driven or health and wellness, like things that you would look up yourself, like fitness and weight loss, even things like mental health wellness, stuff that you would go out and look for yourself. Not so much the medical space where your client would get all of their leads through professional referrals. For example, you break your leg, you go to your primary care doctor, and they're like, "Oh, you're going to need some surgery on that," and then they refer you to a surgeon. the surgeon doesn't really need our help because they get all the clients through these referrals from these other professionals. So we're looking at like business to consumer or business to small business, short sales cycle. The second bullet point is $100,000 per year annual revenue. Now that doesn't have to be achieved yet, but the business needs to be able to scale to that level in order for it to be a good candidate, because we're going to be charging like $10,000 and up. These are going to be relatively high ticket projects. And so you want to be able to say that your marketing budget is going to be like 10 to maybe 20% of the gross revenue of the client or less. But if it's a business that just can't scale to $100,000 a year, they probably don't need a $10,000 marketing budget or plan to kind of market their business. For example, my daughter's piano teacher, right? It's like you can't charge like $1,000 a lesson, and you can't have 1,000 kids in the living room either, right? So that's an example of a business that probably just can't scale to 100 grand per year. Now, again, they don't have to be there yet. It can be startups, but you need to be able to scale at least to that level. And the reason, again, is because you want to make sure that when you're asking them to spend money on marketing, it's a reasonable percentage of their gross revenue. And then the last tip is you want your clients to have customers worth at least $1,000 in terms of the lifetime value of the customer. So what that means is it doesn't have to be a transactional value of $1,000. For example, lawn care, like you don't pay $1,000 for somebody to cut your lawn one time, but over the course of the year, where you're doing the mulching and the seeding and the aeration and blowing the leaves off your yard and just like all the different things that happen throughout the year, you'll probably pay $1,000 or so. And you might even work more than 1 year, right? You might even have the same person work with you multiple years, which then, of course, compounds things as well. So those are the three things: short sales cycle, $100,000 revenue, and $1,000 clients. Those are the metrics for good high ticket clients. There's a couple of red flags, though. One red flag are low ticket or thin margin businesses, like selling an ebook for $9 or something like that. Now, it's not a complete deal breaker, but the reason that I'm mentioning the low ticket or the thin margin type businesses is because in order for you to generate a lot of revenue for them, you have to reach a large audience because it's a low ticket thing and you have to have a lot of transactions. And the cost of reaching the audience might be more than the client is ready to spend. For example, if you had to spend, $5,000 or $10,000 a month on Facebook ads in order to generate, the profits and revenue that you need, like say you spend, I don't know, say you spend $100,000 a year on ads in order to make $200,000. Well, that's great because you're making a lot of revenue, but a lot of clients don't have the $100,000 ad spend budget. So that's why the low ticket, thin margin thing is in there. And what you're really trying to do is, hey, if clients are worth $1,000 or more, then we get a lot of bang for the buck. You don't have to reach as large of an audience in order to really generate some revenue for the client. So that's kind of a red flag. The second one are what I refer to as hobby jobs. And what I mean by that is like people that take their hobby and turn it into a job. For example, like custom apparel businesses, event planning, yoga studios, things like that, where people are so excited about the job itself, they oftentimes don't have a solid business plan behind the job. And like I've been doing this almost 20 years and have found that those types of businesses oftentimes aren't expecting like a high ticket marketing budget or marketing plan to come out of it. So those are the hobby jobs. And then there's the giant slayers. And I just wanted to throw this in. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's more common than you might think. People will reach out to me and they'll be like, hey, you know what? I've got the next thing that's going to take down Amazon. Or like there's some kind of like, forget about PayPal. I've got a new platform, or like something huge. And it's usually a pretty good idea, right? Like it's not necessarily that the idea is bad. It's just that they don't have the infrastructure to take on businesses like that. Usually just like, a couple people or maybe just one person by themselves. And in a best case scenario, it's just too soon. And usually it's just, they get really excited about an idea and it's never going to work out because they don't have the infrastructure to take on these giant businesses. So those are a couple of red flags that pop up pretty regularly to look out for. So now here are the benefits of making the shift into high ticket and value-based web design as opposed to hourly pricing or pricing by the project or something like that. There's a couple of things. First, the way that traditionally people have gone about doing web design and kind of where we are today is this kind of 3-step process where the first thing that you do is you figure out what everyone else charges, like what's the average price of a website or what's the average price of a logo or whatever. And then you price slightly below what everyone else is doing, or maybe you offer slightly more. And then the whole idea is I'm going to give you more for less. And you just kind of keep repeating that process until all of the profit goes away. And then you have these incredibly thin margins, which is where we are today, especially in the WordPress world, where you can actually see, I've seen Facebook ads and stuff for like $500 websites. It's like, you can't do a good job if you don't have the time to put into it. And so we end up in this situation where the margins are just so low that they almost go away. And that's kind of how we get stuck. And then you end up with this kind of cycle of down pointing thumbs where like the commitment from the client, like if you're going to charge $500 to $1,000 for a website, the commitment from the client is kind of low, which means it takes forever to get the copy and there's all these delays. And it's just, that you don't really feel like you have much commitment from the client in terms of their responsiveness. The perceived value is low. The results aren't really going to be forthcoming because you don't really have the time it takes to really dive into the project at the level that they would need to, and actually just in order to actually see results. And then of course, everyone ends up having a bad experience because of the whole thing. But when you flip it, like when you go high ticket, it changes all of those things at once, and the commitment is high, and you have a ton of responsiveness from the client, and they're like, man, I'm really getting a ton of great value. This is a big thing, and the results are going to be there because you have the time it takes to really invest in the client to do your best work, which is of course the stuff you're the most confident in and the stuff that generates the best outcomes for them, and that creates the best experience. And so when you flip it like that, it benefits everybody. And this is one of those things where, like, a lot of times you have to sort of decide between, am I going to do something that benefits our business or that benefits the client? Like, say, for example, you need to, give your staff a raise or something like that to keep them on board. Well, they're still going to do basically the same work. So it doesn't really benefit the client that much, but it benefits you. And so you have to make some kind of a decision on all of that stuff. But with this, it benefits everyone. Like, you get paid more, the client gets better results. It's just a win straight across the board. It's like, even your client's customers get better results because now your client's customers are discovering them because of you in a way that they otherwise wouldn't have. So that's why flipping this is such a great thing, because everybody wins. So now let's talk about, how do you calculate the value of a web design project or a digital marketing project as opposed to the price? We're going to talk about both value and price, but let's figure out, well, how do you value price a project? Like, how do you calculate the actual value? And here's the equation. Or these are more definitions. We'll get to the equation in a second. But the value, the way I'm talking about it here, is what you get. Like, what are the results? And the price is what you pay. And the little algorithm or whatever, I think in code a lot. So it's like, if the value is greater than the price, then the customer buys the offer. If it's not, if the value is to them, their perceived value is lower than the price, then they just walk. So how does that shape up in real life? This is what I refer to as the value equation. And we'll really only talk about goals and probability, but there's, pain and time are kind of in the mix as well. But basically what you do is you take the goal, like, what am I trying to achieve, and multiply that by the probability of you actually achieving it, right? So like, if the goal is generate $100,000 of new revenue, but there's no plan and it just seems incredibly unlikely that you'll do it, then the value is basically zero. Like, if the probability is zero, then the value also is zero. And you can think of that in any area of life. Like, say you're walking down the street, somebody goes to, they say, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million, right? And you're like, no, you're not. You're crazy. You're not giving me $1 million. The probability of getting $1 million from some random person in the street is like zero. And so you just think, well, there's no value in that offer. But if it's like Elon Musk or something is walking down the street and like pops out of the car and says, hey, you want $1 million? He's like, I've got it. And you like see it sitting right there. It's like, wow, the probability is suddenly a lot higher. And so the value of that offer is actually a lot more. And then in terms of things that can detract value, it's like, well, how much pain does the client have to go through, or how long is it going to take to get there? Like, the more pain and the more time, and the more time you're in the pain, the worse the value is. But for now, let's just focus on the goal times the probability is roughly equal to the value. So let's talk a little bit about goals. Goals are not guarantees, right? So this is a sticking point that happens a lot. People are afraid to say what the goal is because they feel like, well, what if I don't hit the goal? And, what's the difference between a goal and a guarantee? the way that we're talking about it here, goals define direction and frame value. Guarantees might boost probability and maybe limit the pain. Goals are going to be mandatory, guarantees are optional. So for example, if you say, if you go into a project and you don't know if the client's trying to make an extra $10,000 a year or an extra $100,000 a year, and you don't have any idea what the goal really is, then how are you supposed to know how many leads you need to generate, what you need to spend on ads, what different marketing strategies you need, where you're going to reach the audience, like what conversion rates you need to hit on different metrics of the marketing plans that you're putting forth? Like, how do you even know how to do anything? It's kind of like if you were to go onto a basketball court and you didn't know where the basket was. And someone said, okay, well, shoot a basket. And you're like, well, I don't know how hard to throw the ball, right? It's like if you can't see the basket, you're just throwing balls around, right? Or like if you're on the golf course or something, it's like, are we doing a putt? Are we doing a drive? It's like, how hard are you going to hit the ball? Because if you don't have the goal, then you don't really have any significant direction behind what you're actually planning to do, which is why goals are so important. But it doesn't mean you have to hit a hole in one on every single shot, right? Because in fact, it'll probably take you a couple of shots to actually get to the goal. But at least you know where you're going and what you need to change in order to actually get the results people want. So that's what I'm referring to when I talk about goals. Guarantees would be like, hey, if you don't achieve the goal, then something else happens. Like, I'll just keep working with you for free until we do, or you get some money back or something like that. And you can optionally do that if you want to, because that kind of boosts the probability that they will get the goal, and it kind of limits the pain and so forth. But that's kind of up to you, and you can do it either way. But you have to have the goal. And that's kind of the point of this slide here, is the importance of actually knowing where you're going. It kind of provides that roadmap and direction. So then we say, okay, well, where's the value going to come from? Like, when we set these goals, how do we know what the value of the goal is? And it's going to come from a combination of potentially 3 different sources. One is the increased revenue, which is really the easiest and most obvious one. Like, if you say, hey, I'm going to make you an extra $100,000 this year, then there's at least $100,000 of value there. But then there's decreased cost, which you might say, well, in addition to increased revenue, that we're also going to streamline your support channels so that you don't have to spend as much time with one-on-one support, and people can kind of automate that, and that's going to decrease your cost. So that would be value as well. So now you're not spending money you otherwise would have been spending. And then the third one, and this is the trickiest one, is the perceived value. And the best way I know to kind of communicate what this actually is with just a quick demonstration. It's like, okay, suppose you go to Chipotle and buy a burrito for $10. You don't buy the burrito because you intend to turn around and sell it to the guy behind you for $12, right? It's like, and it's not saving you any money, right? So there's no increased revenue or decreased cost because you bought the burrito. You just want it, right? And the same thing applies to luxury cars or anything where it's like, you don't have to have it. You just would like to have it. And there's value there. And this is where the art kind of comes in. Like, how much is it worth to someone to not have to stress over finding leads all the time? And what is it worth to someone to be able to have the weekends off and nights off, so they're not at work all of the time? Or what is it worth to someone to just, whatever their problems are, to not have to deal with the problems anymore, right? So there's definitely perceived value in the equation of the types of stuff that you and I would be doing. And so the combination of those 3 things is where the value comes from. So what about project scope, right? Because this is going to be a little bit different too, because if you're charging by the hour or time and materials or something like that, it doesn't really matter how often the client changes their mind about what to do or whatever. But if you're going to do something that's somewhat of a fixed price, albeit based on value rather than cost, you still need to be able to control the scope a little bit. So let's figure out how to do that. A couple of ways to do it. Value-based projects always solve a business problem. So we're trying to figure out what should you include in the project. And you want to make sure that when you're presenting something, you're solving a business problem, not just a design problem, or not just a quick to-do list kind of a thing, but something like we were just talking about with regard to the goals. You also want to make sure that you do enough to generate a measurable result. So you have to solve at least one problem really well. And we're going to talk about different gradations of maybe presenting 3 different versions of your offer, like a good and a better and then a best version of the offer. But basically, the scope of the project is going to solve a business problem with a measurable result. And then you've got a couple different options for how to price it in terms of like different pricing tiers with like good, better, and best approach. So how do you size the packages? Well, what goes in good, better versus best? Well, the way that we do this is the best option is the biggest one, and you give the client everything that you would want if everything was free. Like it's like you kind of put yourself in your client's shoes and say, okay, if I owned this lawn care business, for example, and you know all the stuff that you know as a web designer and digital marketer, what would you do for yourself since you have total access to yourself and you can just do whatever you know for free, right? And so you just kind of make this big list of all the things, and then that's the best option. And then rather than going to the middle option, we then go to the smallest option next and say, okay, out of all the things that you just discovered that you would do if price wasn't even an issue, what is the most important stuff? Like if you had to boil it down to just the bare minimum stuff so that you still are solving a business problem with a measurable result, what are the fewest things that you could do and still make sure that you're getting some results coming in? And then now you've got the best, now you've got the smallest, and then you do the middle one, which is something near the middle, but a little bit closer to the small side rather than the big side. Right. So we'll talk about, I'm going to show you percentages and like do a full blown example here in a second, exactly how all this stuff works. But that's the general idea of like the small, medium, large, or good, better, best options. Now there's a couple of ways to shift the value on things. Like it doesn't always have to be a set of services and you kind of reduce the services. It could be access to you. Right. It's like sometimes people will say, well, I don't really have a million different things that I can offer the client. What I do is I just show people how to grow their YouTube channels or something like that, or grow an email list or build a podcast. Like it could be like one thing, but you still want to be able to have like a good, better, or best approach to it. So like if you had this job or if you had an offer where you show people how to like really scale up their audience on YouTube or something, you can have 3 different versions of it where you kind of gradually move yourself back further with each step. So like you have it done for you, like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm going to run all your ads for you on YouTube. You don't even have to worry about anything. We'll take care of everything for you. Or it could be done with you where it's like, hey, I'm not going to do it, but we'll work on it together. Like, so like I'll kind of jump into your ad manager with you and kind of click around and kind of, we'll work on it together. Anytime you have any questions, you have direct access to me with all of that. And it's kind of a done for you, done with you example of that service. And then there could be like a do it yourself. Well, hey, I've got this course. And if you take the course, you'll be able to see how to run your ads. And you don't really need me because I've documented all of it. And that would kind of be like the lowest price. So that's a great way to sort of have that graduation of price, like small, medium, and large. But then there's another way. And the way that I tend to do it, and you can even combine these 2 ways a little bit if you want to. But the other way that I'll do it is I'll do the value ladder approach, where all the options, the small, the medium, and the large, all lead to this big goal. Like no matter what you pick, you'll eventually get to the top of the ladder. Even the smallest option gets you on the ladder. And this is why it's so important that even your smallest option will still generate some form of measurable result. Maybe not as fast or as large as the other options, but it gets you on the ladder. Now, if you don't do that, if you say, oh, well, the smallest option is I'll just redesign your logo for you, that's not going to get a result. You're still going to have all the same business metrics as you did before. You just have a fancy logo sitting on a vacant site. So you want to make sure that you don't miss the bottom rung. You know what I mean? It's like you got to get up to that first step. And that's the idea about even the smallest option gets you on the ladder. And then you just ask, well, how high up the ladder do you want to start? Are we starting at the bottom? Are we starting at the middle? Starting at the top? And the benefit behind all of that is you're not reducing the overall outcome. You're just stretching the timeline when you do it this way. Because the temptation a lot of times is to say, oh, well, here's my pitch. Like, here's the project that I'd like to kind of give you. And then they say, oh, yeah, but that's too expensive. And then you say, okay, well, let me take a few things away from the offer and kind of reduce the price until we kind of can come to an agreement on what the price should be. And then we'll move forward with that. And there oftentimes is not like an upgrade path to the bigger stuff later. It's just like I'm pulling things away. And the problem with that is when you start pulling things away, it reduces the potential outcome of, or even the value in your client's mind of what you're getting, right? So like, say you go to the Toyota dealership, you want to buy yourself a Prius, and they're like, oh, it's going to be $32,000. Oh, I don't have $32,000, but I got 25. It's like, okay, no problem. We'll just take the seats out and remove the tires and it'll fit right in your budget. It's like, well, you don't want the Prius anymore, right? It's like, I got to have the seats and the tires, right? So it's like, you don't want to remove the parts of the project all the way down to the point where it's like, well, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do anymore. And so that's why if you do the value ladder approach, you get into the situation where as long as they're at least on the first step, results will start coming in, and then we can bump up to the next one, and then results, and then the next one. And then eventually you get all the way to the top. Everybody gets to the top. It's just a matter of how long does it take to get there. So that's the idea of adjusting value in terms of like the value ladder concept. So now what about the price? Okay, so we've talked about what the value is going to be to the client, but what about like what price do you put on the project? Well, here's a couple of ways to go about pricing the project. And there's 3 goals. The first goal is you got to cover your costs, and that's going to set the floor, right? So like you might think to yourself, the way that you traditionally price websites, if you haven't done it this way before, is the way that you sort of set the floor. Like you don't want to go below what it's going to cost you to build, because then you don't make money and you can't stay in business that way, and nobody is the better off. The second thing, though, is you want to make sure the client sees a positive return on investment. Sometimes you get to a situation where it's like the setup and the build and all the other stuff is so expensive compared to the amount of added value to the business that it's upside down. Like it costs more than it's worth. It's a bad investment. So you need to think through, is the client going to see more revenue in their business or more value? It doesn't necessarily have to be revenue. We talked about the 3 sources of value. It could be cost savings. It could be that perceived value thing. But are they going to see more value than it costs? You want to think about that. And then you want to make sure that you get the build, like the setup stuff, and the retainer, so that you have recurring revenue coming in. And so those are the 3 goals for pricing. And let me just tell you just one quick thing, side note about the retainer. If you're charging somewhere around like $500 to $1,000 a month for, usually it's something like hosting and maintenance, or maybe outsourcing some stuff to GoWP with like blog post writing, like they were just talking about a second ago when we started this, or something. Like if you can get into like, say around like 800 and say $850 a month, something like that. And you maybe normally charge, say, $5,000 for the web design, the branding, writing the copy, and just kind of all the setup stuff. Well, simply adding that $850 per month will triple your revenue, right? Like $850 a month is a little more than $10,000 a year. It's like $10,200. And so you take that $10,000 and add it to the $5,000 that you otherwise would have gotten just from the website, and now you're making $15,000. That triples your revenue, but it also means the client is going to be seeing more results out of it because you're there to help them actually get the results out of it. And when it comes to what to actually charge in terms of hours and months and stuff like that, you want to make sure that your retainer is going to be somewhere either 10 hours per month or more, because in terms of your weekly workflow, that's only going to give you like 2 to 3 hours a week at 10 hours a month. And say you're charging $85 an hour, like in your mind, and like when you're covering your costs and stuff, like if your hourly rate is in your mind, it's like $85 an hour, 10 hours a month is $850. So we're not talking about a huge amount of work or time, but we are talking about tripling your revenue. This is how you get 5-figure clients. And just kind of wanted to point that out real quick. So next step, developing your pricing curve. So like, what's the difference between the price ratio between the good and the better and the best? And we already talked about the value being like the goals times the probability, and that equals the value. So we kind of have that covered. Then we have the cost. And I had this kind of fuzzy equation. It's not precise, but basically the idea is you think about how long is it going to take. It's kind of like the time and materials concept for setting the pricing floor. And it's your hourly rate times the estimated hours. But if the project is small, like it's going to take you less than 40 hours to complete the whole thing, I normally will pad the price by 30%, because a small problem in a small project is still a pretty big percentage of the project. Like 40 hours is like, a 5-day project. Well, what if one of the days, the DNS is all messed up and you spend all this time trying to figure out what's going on and you spend like a whole day on it? Well, one whole day out of 5 days is a pretty big chunk of the project. So I like to pad the thing by 30% if it's going to be a small project. If it's bigger than that, then I usually pad it by more like 15%, because a 1-day problem over a month is much less of an issue compared to a 1-day problem on like a 3 or 4 or 5-day project. So, and then again, if you get to the point where you've padded the project and then you come in under budget, and you'd say, okay, well, we actually had allotted a certain price that's more or whatever, and you can just kind of give the client a refund if you want to. And clients don't mind that, right? Like they're much happier if you come in under budget than if you have to charge more later. But anyway, with regard to this whole price calculation, that's kind of how I do that for the cost part. Then there's the outsource costs. So you want to think through, like, am I white labeling any services? Like, am I working with GoWP for site maintenance or blog posting? Or am I going to outsource the branding? Like, am I going to work with 99 Designs or something like that? Do I need to hire a photographer? Is there any video production in the mix? What about the cost of materials like stock photos, plugins, and themes and so forth? And you've got, just think through all the things that you're going to have to spend some money on so that you're making sure that you're covering that as well. And then you think about, okay, what about the monthly retainer part? Well, what's the cost going to be for that? And this is, again, you never really want to go below 10 hours per month. And it's usually a combination of hosting, maintenance, and some form of marketing. For us, we spend about $15 to $20 per month to host a website. We host everything over at Flywheel for whatever that's worth. And we've got the agency reseller thing going on. And but it doesn't really matter what the hosting costs, because a lot of times people will think, oh, well, I don't want to spend $15 or $20 or $30 a month on hosting because nobody wants to spend that much. I'd rather get something less expensive at like $5 to $10 a month. But we charge the client $100 a month for hosting and basically support. And what it includes keeping the site online, but it also includes updating the plugins, cleaning out comments, spam, just being there for the client, because all the time they just send you an email and just ask a quick little thing. And it might only take you 10 or 15 minutes to do it. And you don't want to be out there sending like 15-minute invoices to people every month, because everybody feels like that's ridiculous. It takes too much time. But you can't not do it either, right? Like, if you don't do anything and you just do the 15 minutes for free, it's not too bad if you just have 1 or 2 clients. But when you start scaling that, the next thing you know, you got 15 or 20 or 30 clients, and all of them want 15 or 20 minutes of free work from you, and you can't. And so you get into a situation where you just can't sustain that. So instead, we just say it's $100 a month, and it includes hosting, maintenance, backups, plugin updates, support, like basically hosting plus up to an hour of our time every month dealing with support issues. So that's $100. And then you've got another, $700 or $800 worth of marketing that you might put into the mix, like building a funnel, sending emails, doing a drip campaign, maybe driving traffic to the site from something offline, like postcards, like an every door direct mail campaign that goes to a landing page. But then you tweak the layout of the landing page to make sure you're optimizing the conversion rates on that thing. So and you're only talking about like 2 to 3 hours a week, so you can get 10 hours a month. So it's like Monday morning, right? It's not a ton of time to be able to make sure that you get that 10 hours in. And then it's like $850 a month. You just added $10,000 to the project just by that thing. But also think through, what are the other monthly costs? You're going to use Buffer. You're going to use MailerLite for like sending emails. What's the hosting going to cost you? Maybe you're outsourcing some stuff to GoWP. Kind of get that into the mix, just so you kind of know what everything is all about. And that's the idea behind the cost for the retainer. So now here's how you do the pricing. You figure out what the value is, and then you set your price between 10% and 30% of the annual value that you're going to generate for the client, right? So like, if you think you can generate like $8,000 to $9,000 per month for the client, that would be roughly $100,000 over the year, which means the price for your project should be somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000, right? So like your smallest one would be like around 10% of the overall value, which would be like $10,000, $9,500. The highest end would be somewhere in the 30%, like maybe 29.5, something like that. And then you've got the middle one, say 17.5% is roughly where we shoot for. But the most important thing to note is the gap between the prices. Because when you're presenting the prices, you start with the big one first. You say, this is our biggest thing. Here's the best idea. Here's how we get you the results the fastest. This is what I would do if I were you. And then you say, yeah, okay, it's going to cost. You usually don't say it in the annual value. You would normally say it's going to be like $5,000 to set up and like $1,250 a month or whatever. And so you kind of point it out that way. But the overall point is, you mention the most expensive one first. And then if they say, oh yeah, well, that sounds great, I would love to do it, but we just aren't there yet. We don't have the revenue to be able to afford that. Then you bump it down to the middle one, and it's a significant drop. Like the middle one is closer to the small option than it is to the big option. And you say, ooh, that, 29.5 down to 17.5. Well, that's a big drop. That's much more in our, we can do that. That seems better. And then when you get down to the smaller one, you drop it down a little bit more than that. And usually what will happen is, when you get the small option, people tend to think, well, we could do a little bit more than that. but the big one is too much. So let's do the middle one, right? And so that's the Goldilocks pricing curve. And so like that initial drop is like 12 grand. The second drop is only 8,000. And most people end up going with the middle option and then upgrading to the larger option over time, right? Because now they're like starting in the value ladder, but they're starting kind of at the middle of the ladder. And then as results start coming in, they can then bump up to the full one. So eventually everybody gets all the things. And so you have a nice consistent upgrade path along the way. So here's an example project of how this might all play out. Like say you were going to work with like a lawn care business, and maybe the annual value of a client is like $1,500 on average, right? Like by the time they do the seeding and the mulching and the aeration and the mowing and all of the different things that happen over the course of the season, maybe an average client's like $1,500. And maybe it would be great if you could land maybe one client a week for the lawn care guys. And now that's basically 4 clients over the course of the month. And then maybe you even think of some ways to add some additional revenue to their business. So for example, maybe rather than paying on a on-demand basis, you set up like a subscription service for them where you like subscribe to the lawn care, and anytime anything happens, even if it's over the winter, like even if it snows or something, maybe the lawn care guys can come and just push the snow off your driveway or something. And it's all on subscription, which kind of boosts up the price a little bit. Or maybe you can reduce the cost by saying, hey, well, what if we could get you clients, but they're all in the same neighborhood? So you don't have to drive all over the place to go to service all the lawns, because everybody's kind of in this tight packed route. That might save some cost. And then there could be perceived value in the mix as well, about how happy they would be if they had this family run business that they could, run with their kids or whatever. And then you kind of add it all up and you get this monthly value of like $7,000 a month, and you spread that across the year, and you're looking at an annual value of around $90,000. And then you think, okay, well, what is a solution that I could put together that would generate those types of results? And then you think, okay, well, what if I built the website? My cost to do that might be like $1,400. And then my retainer costs, not including my own time, like if I'm saying outsourcing plugin updates or something to someone, maybe it's $50 a month. Or maybe it's just you're going to do everything yourself, but you're hosting somewhere that costs $50 a month or whatever. So you just have some kind of retainer costs. And then you kind of add all that up together, and you're looking at an annual cost of around $2,000. And then you want to add your profit into it. And this is where you completely disconnect yourself from hourly rates and time, and really leverage the value aspect of it and say, okay, well, instead of $1,400, I'm going to bump the launch price up to $5,000. I'm going to get a retainer around $900. And that means the annual price of this project is going to be like $15,800. And you think, is it a good deal or not? And you reflect back on, okay, we're making $90,000. So, we have that kind of good, better, best thing where the best option is going to be somewhere around $30,000. The minimum price is going to be somewhere around $9,000. So it looks like we've come at $17,500 with $15,800. So that's going to be a really nice middle of the ground package. And then you kind of take everything that you thought you were going to do in that and maybe add a few extra things for the best option, or maybe you pull a few things back for the bare bones minimum option. And that's kind of the idea behind pricing this whole thing out. And that's kind of the whole deal with calculating the price for a project. So I'm going to open up for some questions. If there aren't a lot of questions, I do have one kind of tip to share. That's kind of a big deal, but we can save that for later, depending on how many questions there are.
Awesome. This was so valuable and so interesting. It's great to see that some people in the chat are asking questions, and if you can just pop them into the Ask a Question tab, that works, but I can also answer them from the chat. Doesn't really matter. We're all here, right? Emily has been tweeting really interesting and great just nuggets of golden information. So if y'all want to catch that on Twitter as well, you can get it over there. So let's go ahead and get it with the questions. So the first question is, in terms of the goals that do not equal the guarantees, like how do you manage the expectations of clients who think that they do? So that is a question that came from me.
Okay, yeah, that's the biggest one. Like the hardest part of this whole thing is communicating the difference between goals and guarantees for people. And so the way that we go about doing it is we'll say, hey, we're going to try to, usually we extract what the goal is from the client by saying, well, what would success look like for you? What are you trying to reach? And then they might say, well, we want to double our revenue, or we want to hit $100,000 a year, or we want to hit $500,000. They'll have some kind of a goal. Usually it has to do with revenue generation. Sometimes it has to do with streamlining support or cost reduction. And you can kind of extract that from them and say, well, okay, well, we're going to try to hit $100,000 a year of add-on revenue for you. And then you said, I want to make sure that you understand that I'm not guaranteeing that we're going to make $100,000 overnight. But what I am doing is I'm setting up our ad spend budget and calculations based on the conversion rates of your opt-in pages and the size of your email list that we need to build and the size of the audience we need to reach. Like, there's a lot of different metrics that we need to get answers for if we're going to try to grow by 100,000 as opposed to 10,000 or even a million. Like, you have to figure out like how big of an audience we need to reach. And that's why we're setting these goals. We might not hit it on the first month, but if we don't, we'll be able to tweak it and kind of get there eventually. So the goal is going to be based on what you just said of the 100 grand. And we're going to be just like with golf. It's like you hit the drive and then you hit like a mid-range shot and then you might have to hit a putt. That's the idea. And then if you want to say, and there's a guarantee also, meaning like you don't have to pay until we hit the goal, or if we don't hit the goal within 6 months, I'll just keep working for free until we do. Or you can put guarantees in there as well to kind of contrast the difference between the goal and the guarantee. But you don't have to. The guarantee part is just an optional feature. But the goals are mandatory, because if you don't do the goals, you don't really have any idea how hard you're hitting the ball.
And are there any frameworks for those goal settings? I know people have different types of KPIs, but is there any kind of framework that you recommend for people, or is just up to the business or the agency owner's decision?
The framework that I use is a concept that I refer to as upstream questions. And the idea behind an upstream question is you want to ask questions about what the client wants to see in their business, not just what they want to see on their website, right? So if you find like the conversation is going along the ways like, oh, how many pages do you want, and what color scheme do you like, and who are some competitor designs that you like, and stuff like that, with very implementation oriented questions, you want to shift that towards more like, how many more leads do you need, and what about the qualification of the leads? Like, sometimes people are getting plenty of leads, it's just not at the right price point. Like, I'll talk to people all the time. They're like, man, I get so many calls, but everybody wants like a $500 site. And when I say 5,000, everyone leaves. So that's a problem of lead quality. And so you want to shift the conversation much more towards the business outcomes so that you can actually have some value behind it, as opposed to implementation outcomes. And that's the general idea of the framework that I use for coming up with the goals. Because once you get the business outcomes, it's not that hard of a stretch to figure out what the value is. But if you're stuck with implementation, then you end up not really having much of a conversation at all.
Right. Absolutely. And another question that's on the question box is, what is the game plan if a client does not have a goal or has an unrealistic goal? One of those clients that comes in with the list of build a house.
Okay. So again, with the questions about what people want to see in their business, if they come in with an unrealistic goal, it doesn't necessarily mean it's unrealistic forever, right? So you want to put the timeline behind the goal. Like, I'll have conversations with people all the time, like through DoubleStack and stuff. And I'm like, well, what kind of revenue do you want to generate with your web design business? And they're like, oh yeah, I want to have this huge agency. I'd like to be making at least $1 million a year so that I can support this big team and all this other stuff. And I say, okay, well, that's reasonable. People can do that. Where are you now compared to where you want to be? Like, is this like going to be a huge jump, or are we just doubling your revenue? Like what's the shift? And then that kind of helps bring people's thinking into, well, okay, well, I'm just getting started. I have zero revenue, but eventually I'd like to get to $1 million. And then say, okay, well, that's fine. Well, what do you think would be a good shift over the next 6 months, right? Like, because most people don't think they can go from zero to $1 million in 6 months. And so I will just say, well, why don't we put some shorter time frames on there so we can get some stepping stones that will help us get to what otherwise might seem like an unrealistic goal in the future. So the short answer to the question is, you scope the vision down by way of shrinking the time frame. And then that helps people feel more realistic about the individual steps they want to take.
Right. Awesome. Another question is, in your work with agency owners and developers, what do you see as the biggest challenge to overcome and start implementing value-priced projects?
Yeah, okay, that's an awesome question. The biggest challenge by far is picking a niche, picking a target market to work with. And the implications of that problem are pretty severe, because if you don't pick a target market and you just say, I build websites for everybody, the problem that you end up having is you don't have any way to attract leads. You don't have any marketing or any messaging behind your business other than to say, here are my skills. I have availability. Please hire me, right? So like if you don't have any kind of solution developed up front, or at least a target market defined up front, all you can say is, we do web design, we build websites, we do Facebook ads, we do these services. And everyone in the whole wide world says the same exact thing. And by default, since I've never worked with you before, I can't tell that you've been at this for 10 years and you do an awesome job and that your service and skills are so much better than everyone else's, because I've never worked with you before. And so that means all I can do is maybe dig through your portfolio a little bit and see if I can find other clients that are kind of like me that you worked with before. And maybe I'll try to connect the dots on my own as to whether or not it's going to work out. And that is a huge problem, because you end up not being able to attract the leads that you want, because especially right now, like, have you guys seen what's going on like Fiverr over the past 2 years? Not that you're getting jobs from Fiverr, but like it's booming. It's like, I think they're having 100% year-over-year growth. And so what that means is two things. It means that businesses are looking for people like us to help them, because otherwise there wouldn't be that much growth. But it also means a ton of people are doing what we are doing, more so than ever before. And the solution for that is 3 steps. Step 1, pick a target. And we talked a little bit about the metrics for these types of good clients for your target market. Then the second step is pick the outcome that target wants. So you might pick lawn care as a target, or you might pick real estate as a target, or maybe even pick something like portrait photographers as a target. And then you say, well, what do portrait photographers want? Well, wouldn't it be cool if they could build a 6-figure business working out of their house with their camera, even if they don't have a studio, so that you can bring the leads and give them the infrastructure and the marketing for that, so they can make a full-time living just doing what they love? And then, okay, so we've got the target photographers, we've got the outcome 6-figure business working from home. And then you come up with the third step, which is, how do I do that? What's the solution to create a 6-figure outcome or a 6-figure income for photographers? And then you think through, what is all that stuff going to be? And it's going to be like building the website, doing the branding, social media marketing. It's probably going to be a client portal to review pictures with your clients after you do the shoot. E-commerce, so they can buy photo books and cards and canvases and like all the tangible stuff, and a CRM, so you can say, hey, I did your wedding today, let's do your anniversary next year, or we did baby pictures today, let's do the first birthday next year. And so you kind of get a system going. So you like build this whole thing out. So you end up with those 3 things. You have the target, the outcome, and the solution. Or sometimes I refer to the solution as how viable is the outcome. So like the target, the outcome, and the viability. And you end up with this thing that I refer to as a triangle of value. Those 3 things, the target, the outcome, and the viability, or the solution. And when you have those 3 things, you have fundamentally changed your business. And this is actually leading into the tip. I'll give you the tip that I was going to give a second ago. If you want to have an exit strategy for your business, which is huge. Most people don't think about this, especially when they're just getting started, because they're too busy thinking about getting started. But it could be your retirement plan, or it could be, well, I just don't want to do it anymore. It's critical. It's 100% critical to have this triangle of value thing going on for you. Otherwise, all of the value of your business is like stuck personally on you. And that means when you leave the business, you take all the value with you, right? Because people are thinking, oh, well, I would love to work with Joanne. She's brilliant and a genius. And if I could work with her, that would be great. And then Joanne says, well, eventually I don't want to do the business anymore. I want to sell it. And she's not a part of it anymore, for example. And then like, well, I don't want to work at that business anymore because I wanted to work with Joanne because she's so brilliant, right? So like as soon as she leaves the value, everything's on her. What you want is for your business itself to come up with the, you want people to be attracted to the strategy and the outcome of the business itself. So you can then train other people how to do that same thing, and then you can exit. And the big, huge benefit of that is you can sell the business for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars if you do it that way. If you don't do it that way, you have nothing. And so what that means is if you're giving up working at an agency or having a job somewhere in favor of running your own business, you're giving up the 401k and the consistency of the income and all that other stuff in favor of your own business. But the business itself, if you put value in that as well, then you can have your cake and eat it too. then you can say, well, I'm making a lot of I'm making a lot of revenue just doing the work, doing these value-based projects. And when I'm ready to retire or exit for whatever reason, I've got the 401k thing too, right? Like I've got the value in the business itself, which you can then sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you don't do it that way, you're missing out on hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I just wanted to mention that as a big triangle of value. It's the whole thing right there. So I hope that wasn't too long of an answer.
No, that's awesome. I mean, I completely agree. It's often mentioned is that people are not buying you, they're buying your processes, especially when people are being acquired, et cetera. And that's maybe a far other topic, but I completely agree. And I can't agree more. Another question that we have is, how do you present improving the quality of leads to potential clients? Is that typically a separate service, or how do you present that improvement?
So the quality of the leads is a different thing than the quantity, of course. And so this is back towards asking about the business questions of what's going on. And so usually what will happen is I'll say some things like, tell me about, your leads. Like, are you getting enough leads coming into the business? And then they will either say, no, we're not getting enough and we have a quantity problem. Or they say, yeah, we're getting plenty of leads. It's just not the right quality. And then I'll say something like, well, where do you ever get good quality leads ever? Does anyone ever find you? And you're like, that's a perfect client. And if they say yes, they'll say, well, where is that coming from? It doesn't even have to be online. It could be word of mouth referrals or something like that are the best. Or it could be, well, once a year we get to go to this conference and we get really good clients from the conference, but that's it. Right. And so you can begin to differentiate between where the good clients are coming from and the bad clients. And then you can say, what other things are you doing to generate leads right now other than the good thing? And then they might say, well, every time you run Facebook ads, we get crappy clients or something like that. And then so now you have a clear picture of what's causing the problem. They're not doing enough of the good stuff and they're doing too much of the bad stuff. And then you can say, well, maybe there's some things that we can do to tap into the profile of these good clients. So it could very well be that the targeting of the Facebook ads is not hitting the right types of people. It could be that those types of people just aren't on Facebook at all and we need to do something else. And so you can say, well, if we were able to get a higher quality of client by doing more of the good stuff, then doesn't that impact everything else about the business in terms of how long it takes to onboard people and the overall number of clients you can serve and all that other stuff. So we try to differentiate between sources is essentially what I'm trying to say. And then just do more of the good sources and fewer or less of the bad. And the less of the bad is either we tweak the bad to target basically like the good, or we think of different options. I'll give you one little quick example. If it's a local client as opposed to a national client, like if the client's trying to get local leads, a lot of times web designers and digital marketers might treat the local client as if it's a national client and say, the only thing we need to do is run Facebook ads. Because if it's a national client, there's plenty of people on Facebook to fill up one business usually. But if it's a local client and you have to be within driving distance of the business, not all those people are on Facebook all the time. And depending on what the business is, it might not be hardly at all, right? And so you have to have multiple different referral sources. And so you begin to think, well, what can you do to drive more referrals other than just Facebook ads or whatever? Well, what if it's something like, what if it's somebody who does like roofing or garage door repairs or something like that, or some kind of a home service? Well, you can get people in business directories like Angie and Thumbtack and Nextdoor and stuff like that. And you can just shift the way that they've been marketing so that you have like multiple engines running all at the same time. And that helps with the quality of the lead gen.
Awesome. Another question we have from Lloyd is that in terms of a good client prospect, you mentioned that there should be a short sales cycle. What does the short, sorry, I got another question and just like bumped up in the list. What does a short sales cycle look like? Is it weeks or is it months?
It's something a month or less. Ideally, it's something you can choose on the spot. Like the longer it goes, the worse it is. So if it's a direct, like even if it's a business to business offer that you're offering, like if I said, hey, do you want me to do your taxes? You could probably say yes or no right now. Like, or maybe you look into me a little bit to see if I'm a good tax person or whatever, but you could probably figure it out over the course of a couple of days. You don't have to bring a huge committee in to figure the thing out. You don't have to wait for a committee meeting to show up in order to actually talk about it for the first time. It's like, you can just decide. And that's what we're looking for. And the more we can push things toward even like almost an impulse buy, the more effective our tools are going to be, like signing up for an email list, getting like a lead nurturing sequence, like a drip campaign, watching a webinar, going through some kind of a funnel or whatever. Like that stuff tends to work best if it's a 1 month or shorter sales cycle, which would include the whole process of discovery, nurturing the lead, and then eventually making a decision. That whole, like, so it could be like someone has never heard of you before. They see a Facebook ad, they click it, they hit a registration page, they watch a webinar, they get a couple of nurturing emails, and then within a week or so, now they're a client of yours. That would be awesome.
That's the ideal. Gotcha. And another question we have is, and I know we're right on the time mark. I want to be very cognizant of your time. Do you have time for a couple, just 2 more questions?
Oh yeah, I got time.
Okay, great. Awesome. So what is something you always think agency owners must ask or request as a client, but they always forget?
What do agencies owners, what do they need to ask, but they forget?
Yeah. So
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay. So for example, let's say you have your ideal client and they have an issue and they come up to you because they have a problem you have to solve. What is something you always think like, this person should always have this, but they always forget that must be in their needs?
Okay, like in terms of like a service that they could be offering that they tend to overlook or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or not necessarily a service they could be asking. I guess this question is a little bit contrived, but in terms as coming on as a client. So let's say they have their goals, they have all of the things they need from your list, but there's something that, maybe they don't have a long-term roadmap, or maybe they're, I don't know, they have that list of guarantees rather than goals. What is something they always they don't, that you think they should have?
I see what you're saying. Okay. Well, here's the thing that I think is missing from almost everyone's client onboarding process, which I think fits this whole category here. And because there's a lot of variability in what you asked during the conversation. The biggest thing that I think most people miss, especially when it comes to value pricing a project, happens around when the client says, "Oh, well, I know someone who can do all of this for less," right? Like maybe they know their brother's kids or something like that can build websites in WordPress or whatever.
My brother-in-law.
So somebody did that.
My brother-in-law has a website.
Exactly. And so what I like to do then is say, well, talk the client out of hiring you to some degree by listing qualifications that you need them to have in order for the project to be successful. And I will say this all the time, like whether I'm talking about whether or not somebody wants to join DoubleStack or not, or whether I'm going to build a website for somebody or whatever, in all the areas of my life where I do any sort of onboarding of clients, I always say, in order for me to accept this project, like if it's a web design client, in order for me to accept this project, here's what I'm looking for from you to make sure that this project is going to be successful. And then I'll list 2 or 3 things. Like, for example, you gotta be decisive, right? Like if you're going to hire me to build a website for you and I'm like halfway through it or 75% through it, and then you change your mind, I got to unwind everything. We'll never make any progress. So you got to be decisive. And there might be some other traits that you're really looking for. Like you don't want people to be overbearing, or you'd like them to be open-minded. You'd like them to be coachable, right? That's another big one for me is the coachability. It's like, if you're going to say, I'm the expert when it comes to online marketing, you can be the lawn care expert, but I know how to get clients online. I need you to be coachable for that so that we can make progress in the right direction. And then say, if I were to accept this project, would those traits apply to you? I always say that to every single time. And almost everyone doesn't do that because they don't want to put any kind of wrinkles in the plan. Like they don't want to put any, most people feel very, they just feel like they feel like leads are so scarce that it's important to get this particular lead to say yes no matter what.
Right.
And the problem with that is it downgrades your value and really might even wreck the entire potential of the whole project if the client's going to be overbearing and insist on doing it their way, even though your way is better. Like, can you imagine going to the doctor and like, say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to give me a open heart surgery and use these tools and all this other stuff. And then the guy might be like, well, gosh, you probably just have like heartburn. What if you just had a Tums? I don't want a Tums. I need the surgery. Like, you know, you would never, the doctor would be like, get out of here. Right.
And also my brother-in-law, he's also a doctor.
Yeah. That probably resonates a little bit. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. There's some degree of saying these are the qualifications you need to have in order for this project to be successful. Let's get that out of the way up front. And when you do that, a lot of times what will happen is the client will start talking about, they'll start selling you on working with them. Like, this is why you should accept me, because I'm going to do all those things and I have a history of being coachable. I'm always decisive and all the good things.
Right.
And that really helps establish like the boundaries of the relationship and the expectations up front without being fake or phony, or without trying to say anything about fake urgency. Like, if you start now, well, you know, you're going to miss out, or you don't have to do any silliness. You just kind of lay the groundwork up front. And then that really helps. And I think everyone should do that. I think everyone should have standards for what it takes to work with you. And they're standards that they're like, you got to be respectful. You got to be punctual. You got to, like, there's certain things that are going to just irritate the socks off of you if they don't do it. And you absolutely do not want long-term client relationships with people that make you feel like you don't want to work with them anymore, right? So that's the big missing component, is that qualification of you qualifying your leads before you accept the project.
Right. Awesome. That's so, everything you've said is so valuable. And I just want to, we have 2 more questions, but I just want to make sure that we also share your offer for our community, which is you can get a coupon code for 50% off on all upstream questions, a 1-hour video course on turning everyday deals into high ticket clients. And you'll also get a free 30 marketing strategy call with Lee. If you could get better clients, drive better results, and triple your revenue simply by asking the client different questions. So I'm going to share, that's your offer, Lee. Is there anything you could add to that?
Yeah, so it's a 1-hour question that goes into how to find out what business objectives the client has, rather than just what implementation tasks are on the list. And it shifts into this whole value pricing thing. And like, again, people have watched that video. It's a 1-hour just kind of instructional video on how to do it. And people double, triple, even like 10x their rates just from watching that video as well. So check that out if you like it. If you don't like it or whatever, there's like 100% money back guarantee. If you don't like it, just let me know. I'll refund you. And if you want to, I'm also offering for you guys in GoWP, if you want to talk to me about it for like 30 minutes, we can set up a Zoom call and kind of go over it together for free, just as part of the thing.
That would be awesome. Thank you. That's so generous of you to offer. That's so great. Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely take you up on that. And I just want to let everyone know, since we're going a little bit over time, that if y'all have any more questions for Lee post webinar, he is in our NAO community. So y'all can just, make a post and tag him, and we can start another discussion on their post webinar if anyone is interested. And I'm going to go ahead and answer ask you the last questions for you to answer. And this one is another one from Lloyd. So, for example, Wix has been offering a lot of add-on services. How do you compete against such a cheap, bigger competitor?
That's an awesome question. This is all about the results and none about the implementation. So like, if someone thinks they can get the same results from Wix, they should just go use Wix. In fact, like, I'll work with people that use Wix or Squarespace, or Webflow is becoming really popular. Duda is relatively popular. Obviously, WordPress is what I use all the time. The actual technology is much less important than the strategies. Like, you could build the most beautiful Wix website you ever saw in your life, but if you don't have that solution, like we're talking about the viability of achieving the goals, if you don't have that component to it, then so what, right? So like, if someone says, and this goes back to the qualification of the leads too that we were just talking about. If someone says, oh, well, you just said it's going to cost $5,000 to do all this stuff. Well, I got somebody who could build me a $500 website on Wix, and it includes all that same stuff. And then I'd say, okay, we'll go do it on Wix, right? It's like, if you feel like you can get the same results we talked about for $500, you'd be crazy to work with me. Why would you want to work with me? And I'll even say, why would you want to work with me when you could get something for $500? And if you use the word why, people feel like it's accusatory, and they'll feel like they need to be defensive.
Right.
But as long as you're doing it about yourself, it doesn't really matter, because it's like, why would you want to, you don't want to say, why would you want to work with your brother's kids? Because then they'll start defending their brother's kids. But if you say, why would you want to work with me? Then they'll start thinking about, well, what are some reasons I want to work with you? And of course, that's what you want, because you want them to think, well, the reason I want to work with you is because I'm not just getting the website, I'm getting this whole business strategy that my brother's kids would have no idea how to put together, but you've got this solution. And so if you go to the solution first agency concept, which is really what I'm talking about here, it's the opposite of what everyone else is doing. Most people have a solution last agency, where step one is you get a lead from somewhere. Step two is you have a discovery session to figure out what they want. And step three is you come up with a solution to do all the stuff you talked about in step two. That means your solution is last. And if your solution is last, the only thing you can do to market your business is talk about your skills, which is, of course, what everyone is saying. If your solution is first, because you have that triangle of value we talked about, where you have a target market, an outcome, and a solution that achieves that outcome, then you can start wrapping all of your marketing around the outcome of the solution. So we were talking about the 6-figure photography business you can run out of your house with a camera. If nobody's offering that on Wix, you see what I mean? It's like, they might be offering photography websites, but they're not going to show you all the whole workflow and the CRM and all the email marketing and the lead nurturing and all the other stuff that you need to actually build a 6-figure photography business. So if you want the solution first style agency, in fact, I've actually got another free training you can watch if you want to. If you go over to doublestack.net, which is our website, you'll see a little watch now button, and you can click that, and it's totally free. And you can just kind of get the blueprint for how to build a solution first agency, and check that out if you want to as well. It's totally free.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm sharing that on the chat right now. Thank you so much. And the last question we have for you today is, which is the plugin that you built that got over $1 million?
Oh, yeah. Cart 66. It was our e-commerce plugin. And we launched it way back when. So it was like, I think 2012, maybe, was when we first started it. And this is like before WooCommerce was out there or anything. There was like, I think there was WP e-commerce and Shop. And both of those two plugins were like, they kind of assumed you were going to have like the next Amazon, like tons of different products with lots of product categories and everything. And I had a friend who built like noise reduction headphones. They're kind of ugly. They're out of these like big things that you might wear if you were going to run a chainsaw or something like that.
Right.
And he was a drummer, and he just wanted to, put these headphones on and be able to hear the rest of the band without cranking up the volume so that they went deaf. And so I said, I want a set of those headphones too. And they were awesome. And I was like, John, you got to do something about your website, man. It's like, it's one of those black websites with like the twinkling stars in the background. It's like, if it wasn't for PayPal, I never would have felt comfortable sending him any money at all. And so I said, hey, John, you got to fix this thing up. And he's like, I don't really care about it. It's 2012. Like, he was selling all his headphones to a music catalog. And so he said, well, if you want to build a website, then you can just, buy these headphones from me wholesale. And so that's what we did. So I'm buying these like crates of headphones and sticking them up in the attic and everything, and just kind of selling them out of the house. But I needed a way to sell it. And so I just wanted to, like, it was just one thing. It's one set of headphones. It comes in black or white, and that was it. So like no product categories, just one thing, and you choose the color. So I wanted a way to like stick a product on a page and sell it without all the hassle of all the other stuff. So we built Cart 66. And that rode all the way up until it got into the WP swag store was running Cart 66 for a while. Whoa. And we were in conversation with them about whether or not they wanted to either buy us or buy WooCommerce and WooThemes and everything. Obviously, they went with WooThemes. And it had to do, really the big part of the decision had to do with, we really wanted to build like a payment platform that produced secure payments for folks, so they didn't have to worry about PCI compliance. But they didn't want to get involved with all the hosted stuff that much. They just wanted to just have like a plugin, and that was pretty much it. And so they preferred the WooCommerce approach. But for a while, we were actually a plugin in WooCommerce. It was we were doing all the payment gateway stuff. We had like, I think we supported maybe 50 or 60 different payment gateways. And so we just took the payment gateway part and kind of bundled that into WooCommerce, and we're kind of teamed up on it there for a while. And then the way it is now, it's like Stripe and everything is out there. You don't really even need the payment gateway stuff that we had before. So so about 3 years ago, we sold the whole platform. So I'm not doing that anymore, but it was a ton of fun when we were kind of riding that whole wave with the e-commerce stuff.
That's awesome. I absolutely love hearing these stories about, way back when, 2012, that's not that long ago. But
It's like 10 years, I guess, right?
I was thinking you were gonna say, oh, you know, the .com boom. I'm like, okay, well, I understand that. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't that long ago, but that's awesome. I love hearing these just like such a specific, such a niche down um story. And it just goes to show, like, solve your own problems and people will, like, because a lot of people have the same problem as you do. And that's why it's so important to find community and like-minded people who like run these businesses. So I just absolutely love hearing these type of stories. I'm so glad Ben asked. Thank you for asking that question, Ben. And yeah, that's it for today. We're 15 minutes over. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was awesome. This such a great, valuable topic that we discussed today. And if yeah, again, join us in our community if you have any questions for Lee post webinar, and feel free to rewatch this whenever you want. It has a hopefully eternal life on Crowdcast, and I will see you on the next time. Thank you so much, Lee.
Thank you. And guys, if you want to just like tag me in a comment or something, if you have a question, I'll keep an eye on that stuff. And we can just keep the conversation going, like in the GoWP group or all the stuff that Joanne just said. I'd love to help any way I can.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the group.